do you plan your year? Like when you have to conduct this strategic planning for every year, what's the way by which you plan? And I remember one of the discussions which I was having with you a few days back, you mentioned about a very interesting thing about how you bucket things as good to have and must have, etc. So maybe if you can talk about your own way of conducting the strategic planning, that will be really insightful for everybody. So Narayanan.
Yeah. See, the planning is an exercise where you decide what you want to do and prioritize things the way you want to do for the next year. There are two triggers for it. There are some things you want to do. There are some things you are compelled to do in that year, which are if there is a compliance requirement which you have to do in that year. So it's a must item which you will include for the year, that year's planning. So the thing which what you mentioned now is always I feel that you should have an approach of bucketing things in three areas: need to have, should have, and must have. Okay. So then the requirement comes in from, as a risk manager, what you feel these are the emerging risks which I want to tackle it this year. So you take those initiatives. And the next figure would be there are different incidences that happen which compelled you to enhance your control. So there is a fire which you have to address. So those initiatives, you take it. There are some initiatives which are business driven. Business is starting a new business vertical, or business is going to launch a new product, or business is going to change the way they are doing business on an existing product, which which creates new threats and new vulnerabilities which you have to address by way of security product implementation. So you have multiple factors which bring the requirements to that year. So after having all these things, then you have to bucket it that which are need to have, which are should have, or which are must have. Okay. So this, if you segregate into these three and show it to your CFO that what are the internal and external factors affecting these initiatives, and if you don't do it, example, it's my famous example. If you want to do a cybercrime mitigation project, which includes introducing a strong authentication, fraud monitoring, fraud detection capability in your internet banking channel, to implement a control like this will take 1 to 1.5 years of life cycle. And to introduce this change to the user, it takes another 6 months. If you decide to issue a token, then the token distribution, education of customer, it takes time. So it could be need to have this year in 2012-13, but it will become must have in 2013 to 14 financial year. So you can take a call that if I do it now, then I'm getting a cost advantage. But if I do it next year in a crunch time, by the time this technology, a lot of people will, this will become a must-have. So obviously, when there is a demand in the market, the cost is going to go up. So you can take those strategic calls and explain your CFO saying that although it is need to have now, but it is prudent to do now. Otherwise, we will pay 2x of cost next year. Okay. If there is a compliance requirement, indicative requirement, which banking regulatory authority like Reserve Bank of India or SEBI or Telecom Regulatory Authority says that this control to be implemented in a period of 3 years, don't wait for the second year. Start from the first year. So you get the cost advantage. If you go late and if you try to implement at the last moment to meet your compliance requirement, then you need to double your resource. You have to pay extra money to the product vendor. You will have a lot of project management pressures to do that activity. So my recommendation is have these 3 buckets, take all the initiatives from various channels, put it, segregate it, take strategic decisions, then you can optimize your budget as well as do what really matters to the business and to your risk both.
Wonderful. So that's very insightful, Narayanan. Maybe I would like to add some of my experiences. So when I started off myself, my background is computer science and artificial intelligence at IIT, etc. But then gradually I moved on more as a business guy. And once you get funded by a VC, you need to think of business first. So even though I'm a technologist from heart, my day-to-day role is business. So from that background, there are a few things which I probably would like to mention, and some has been covered by Narayanan. So when I typically try to conduct a strategic planning, I look at a couple of things. One is, what's my goal? Now, when it comes to security planning, the goals are of 3 kinds. It could be more, but 3 things that comes to my mind. One is you have the business goals. It's very important because you might need to achieve PCI compliance because that will drive sales. So understanding the business needs is very, very critical. The next comes the regulatory need. And the third is the security needs. So security needs are the ones which, if you don't do, it could cause disruption in your business. So once you understand the goals which you have, which is very defined for your particular organization, you next need to look into the constraints. Like, what are the constraints do you have? Is the CEO going to approve that kind of budget for you? Is there a cost cutting happening right now? Or are you planning for the next year and you're considering a huge investment this year? So what are the kind of constraints which you have? So defining the goals and constraints is very important. And the next part, and this is something which I am a big believer of, which is 80-20 rule. You need to then think of that which are the top 20% things which I can do to achieve 80% of the results. And that's very important because if you can choose those right 20% of things, it's not just going to give you that satisfaction of achievement, it's going to motivate your team, it's going to show a good picture to the management, and that entirely changes the way the organization works. So prioritizing those top 20% becomes really, really critical. And maybe I would like to ask Narayanan and Murali, and maybe we can start with Murali this time. How do you prioritize what to do this year? So is there a way by which you prioritize your stuff?
See, usually my kind of benchmarks are a little bit crazy, if I can use that word. One of the recent worries that we are observing is that we have become, as an enterprise, as a technology organization, all of us, as technologists, we have become adept at quickly handling, threat attacks, multiple threat vectors. But recent trend in 2012, that was at least came into public and openly being revealed, is mutating threat vectors because of the new capabilities in the operating systems like iOS or Windows 7, Windows 8, or Android, all these things. The modern is allowing to create more advanced mutating threat vectors, and the bring your own device kind of a stuff is actually amplifying this problem. Sometimes we can't even identify that we have been attacked, and this thing happens like that, and we don't even know that we have been harmed. So what we do as a general practice, I don't recommend it to everybody, but it's not a bad idea to consider, is the CapEx benefit that we are gaining because of this bring your own device. At least 1/3 of the gains we are making in that CapEx reduction, we should put it into the OpEx to manage the security theater. We need to have additional funding to do what we are doing, and as companies grow their top line, they also want to grow their bottom line. So people want to control the overall expenditure. The threat is infinite, but there is no budget to manage the infinite threat. So we need to find ways to make money and find funding to actually manage the stuff. So one of the strategies we are considering and implementing is whatever ROI that we are estimating based on the BYOD, encouraging the work-life balance and the mobility and all the stuff, and commoditization of the big data because of the storage and the sharding, all those things. At least 1/3 of that we are trying to put it into operating expenses, especially towards the security area.
Wonderful. So, Murali, you have a very interesting kind of process, and I believe it's more progressive thinking for the future. Narayanan, from operational perspective, how do you think an organization should prioritize? You talked about bucketing and prioritization. So my question is, do you have any specific way by which you prioritize yourself? Is there any specific way by which you say no to something? Because prioritizing can also be looked at as saying no to something.
Yeah, if I give you two answers, one is a very generic answer is the answer is a common sense. Okay. Yeah, but that becomes very subjective. The other answer from a risk management perspective is you see what is your risk appetite. Okay, if there are 10 things which you want to which are in a bucket and you want to prioritize them, and so you look at what is your risk appetite and what you can live with it without doing this year, then you will find 6 things out of it which are you are sure that whatever impact it creates, it will be within your risk appetite. Okay, business always has risks. So then you left with 4. Okay, then you can see that what are the benefit these 4 are going to bring in. Then you can prioritize. Okay, this is a very generic principle, but when you apply it with 10 different things, this is what works better.
That's a good point, Narayanan. So basically experience counts when it comes to prioritization, and I fully believe in that.